Hello and welcome to another episode of Hitting the Ball with me, Ash Taylor, and Shirley Heron. I just said Shelley and I meant to say Shirley Heron. Just a little bit
Do you know you're the second person who's called me Shelley this week?
Oh, okay. I don't know who the first one was, so it wasn't deliberate. Just came out. I'm sitting here this week just suffering with a cold a little bit, so maybe my tongue got tied up in somewhere in my mouth. Anyway, you come this week with a topic, idea, a thought.
I thought it'd be interesting to talk about customer service. I had a situation this week where I wanted to make a change to my car insurance. Not a big change, just a change. And the car insurance that I've got, you can go on the portal and you can put in the details that you want to change, and then it spews out a price at the other end of it. And it was quite an expensive price. So I started thinking, well, actually, I need to, this is not just a £25 change. So I started thinking, okay, I need to look around because it may be cheaper for me to just cancel this insurance and go with a new insurance company. So I did a whole load of research on Compare the Market and Money Supermarket and all that kind of stuff. Found another company that was substantially cheaper, and so took out that insurance. I rang my original insurance company to cancel, and the guy on the end of the phone said to me, have you checked on the portal? And I said, yes, I have. And it was more than twice as expensive as the insurance company that I went with to make the change. And he said to me, well, did you try making a completely new quote rather than a change to your existing quote? And I said to him, why would I do that? And he said, well, sometimes it comes out cheaper. And I said, but as a customer, why would I think I'm an existing customer, why would I think to go, oh, hang on a minute, I'll try and take out a completely new quote? And then he said, well, have you tried on different days? And I said, why would I try on different days? And he said, well, the insurance changes, the price changes every day. And I said, but as a customer, I don't have the time to start checking on multiple days and in multiple ways to try and figure out whether you guys are going to be cheaper. I've got a problem. I need it fixed. I just want a price. I've sorted it out now. And he said, well, but you could always cancel that one and then take a quote out with us. And I said, why would I do that? And it just, I didn't, that was the end of the conversation. I cancelled my insurance and I've just gone ahead with the new company. But it made me think, why do companies make it so difficult for existing loyal customers to do business with them? If they had given me a reasonable price that was broadly in line with where I was getting prices elsewhere, I'd have stayed with them. But I, as a customer, I don't want to have to, jump through hoops and, figure out what the best way is to get the best quote. It should be, for me, I think it should be standard. Why do I have to jump through hoops and, wave ribbons in the air to try and frig the system because that somehow is the way it works? Why can I not just get a good price for being a loyal customer?
Yeah, and it seems to me like I think the insurance world is kind of rife with it, because we spoke a few weeks ago about me getting my car, I think it was home insurance, renewed, and I just, the company sent me a renewal that was 50 quid cheaper
we
than previous years, and I started looking at the other options, and it was so difficult so it was almost like the opposite. And so the process that I was put through with the existing insurers, they just made it really, really easy. But I think it does beg the question around this principle, if you like, of friction. That I think we've also spoken about, has come up a number of times, is what are you doing in your business that you're making assumptions about that you think your customers will know that they don't. And it sounds to me, and obviously I wasn't in on the conversation, but it sounds to me like this guy was almost getting exasperated with you. It was, well, why would you not do that? But he's got insider knowledge.
Yeah, how would I know to do that?
Exactly.
You know, we did talk about friction, and there's good friction and there's bad friction. And your example of your home insurance was definitely a good example of how to make it easy for your customer. And my car insurance is obviously a bad example of how to make it easy for your customer. But it made me think, like, it's because I started thinking, oh, I'm going to tell all my friends about this and don't ever insure with this customer. And that's obviously the fear for a lot of companies, is that, you know, they say if you get a bad experience, you tell 10 people. If you get a good experience, you might tell one or two. And I thought, I was thinking about it and all the other bad experiences that I've had with other companies. And I thought, you know, it's easy to say, it's easy to complain, right?
Yeah.
What can companies do? It started me thinking, what would I have wanted them to do? How would I have wanted them to treat me? And what can other companies do to make it easy for their customers to do business with them? Because we know that it's cheaper to keep a loyal customer than to find a new one. That's fairly common knowledge, I would have thought. Most companies, and I would hope that most business owners know that. So why do some companies almost go out of their way to make it difficult? Were they subtly trying to make it difficult for me to leave, or were they just completely missing the ball in terms of it's so difficult to make this change, or so painful that I'll go somewhere else because that's easier? I don't know, but how come companies make it easy to do business with you?
I wonder how much of it is based around the industry itself, in that, yeah, insurance prices do change by the day, by the hour, but we're not necessarily going to know that. And I think it comes back to that insider knowledge piece, that if you're within the industry, if you're within the space, you know all the little tricks and tips and how to cut the corners and get the best prices and all the rest of it. But to actually openly share that with your customers is going to be detrimental to your business. So I guess in your particular example, maybe the question is less about customer service and more about, what's the word I'd use, sort of business sabotage. Because I suspect he won't be thanked by his employers for letting you know about those corner cutting opportunities.
Maybe. I mean, I kind of thought we'd moved past all of this, you know, secretive juggling of insurance with the change, because the law's changed recently, hasn't it, so that new customers don't get a better deal than existing customers. So I kind of thought we'd maybe matured past that, but clearly not. But sometimes it's about the way it's presented, because if he had said to me, rather than forcing me as the customer to jump through the hoops and to try and find the best day or the best way of getting that quote, if he'd actually said to me, I'm sorry you want to leave, let me see what I can do.
Yeah, okay.
And had come back to me with a substantially better price, given that I've already told him that the new price for the change part was less than half what they were quoting me. If he'd said, oh, I'll match that for you, I might have thought twice about cancelling my insurance, because I had a cooling off period with the new people. Yeah. But he didn't. He just went, oh, well. And it made me feel like I wasn't important, and they were happy to lose my business. So I thought, okay, well, let's lose the business then.
Yeah, and I think some of that is, I think maybe then it's a mixture of both, because there's a training issue. I think there's an industry myth issue going on, but also he just doesn't care.
Well, I guess he gets paid no matter what, really, doesn't he? I don't know. I've never worked in the insurance quote industry, so I don't know. Are they paid by the number that they get to take up, or? It's
just telesales, isn't it? It's number of calls and how quickly you answer the dials and whether you resolve the problem satisfactorily, or maybe it's just whether you resolve the problem.
Well, and there's another thing is, unlike many companies, I've had no follow-up from this company saying, how did we do? So a lot of companies now, you get a text or an email or something saying, did we resolve your problem? Yeah. Here's a copy of the transcript, that kind of stuff. Nothing from this company at all. Not even thanks for giving us a call, we're sorry to see you go.
Because I've been, and I'm sure you have as well, been on in situations with various companies, big, large, multi-corps, whatever, where you've been a valued customer for many years, year after year after year. And it always surprises me, the quality of how important it is to them to retain your custom. Because you'll ring someone, I don't want to use names because that'd be unfair. You never know who's going to listen to this. But you might have a subscription with a large entertainment TV based service, for example, and ring them up, and they will, okay, you're thinking about leaving, let's pass you on to our retention team. Mm-hmm. They actually have and the retention team, and however much of this is scripted and made up, I don't know, but it's all, let me see what I can do for you today. I'll go and chat to a manager, I'll come back, and they will come back with a deal that's worth staying for, even if it's for a short period of time. And I think there's a really important piece here, and it kind of links with pricing and loyalty and stuff like that as well, in that I know, for example, in our business, I would much rather compromise fee for a short period of time to create a situation where we keep people as clients for 5, 6, 7 years than hold really fast on the fee for the short period when perhaps they're not in a position to justify the cash outlay, but they're the right people, and work with them so that they get to a point where the fee is no longer an issue and they feel a level of reciprocity, I suppose, and want to stay with us. It's not, is that customer service or just being smart? I don't know, or just kind or whatever. So there's lots of ways of looking at it. But my view is always to look at the long term. And, I've had examples of companies, big companies that I've, bought from, who have gone, well, we'll reduce it to this for 6 months. And then after 6 months, it will go back up to that. And for me, that's great, because if I'm thinking about leaving, they're making it difficult to leave. Yeah. But in the right way, rather than putting lots of obstacles in the way. And you've got to figure out, they're actually saying, look, we'd rather keep you. We'll make it easy for you to stay. And we're not going to make it free or whatever. We're going to get something off you. But we'd rather know you're still going to be a customer in 6 or 7 months' time for another year or so than to hold out for that fee right now and lose it. Now, if you're in a slightly smaller business, as most of us are compared to those big companies, you have to weigh that up against cash flow. You have to weigh that up against, revenue and contribution and all the rest of it. But you also, I think, have to weigh that up against what the narrative told is by that customer to their peers, and whether loyalty has value. I suppose. I think that's possibly the bigger question: is how much value do we place on loyalty?
I think, to an extent, I think that depends on your business, because if it's a subscription base, or something you're paying for monthly, or it's a repeated business where you think that, every year they're going to come back and buy that same product, then I think it's maybe slightly easier to give a little on price, or to give them something that keeps them loyal. But if it's a product that they may only buy once every 2 or 3 years, or maybe they'll buy once from you and then next time they'll buy from somebody else, just because, like, I'm thinking of my ice skating clothing. So they might buy from me 1 year, but then the child grows up a bit. They don't want, crystals on their jackets, for example, and they want something a bit more grown up. They might buy from a different company. Then I think it's a little bit harder to then give them a discount, because at the end of the day, that is essentially your profit margin that you're eroding, with there's no real loyalty or continuance of a relationship there. There might be, and that's the true of all businesses, but there's much less certainty than somebody who's paying a monthly subscription, or it's I don't know, like I'm thinking of something like carpets cleaned, where every year you might say, oh, actually I need my carpets cleaned again, or every Christmas you have, I don't know, a hamper that you buy or something like that. So I think some of it does depend on the type of product, but I think some of it depends on the attitude of the customer, because I had people coming in who were saying, oh, is there any chance of a discount? Is a very different question to, well, I'm associated with this club and they get 20%, and so why can't I? And, after you've sort of explained, well, actually they get 20% because it's a volume discount because they're buying large quantities on behalf of the club, but then you kind of go, okay, but this is a club jacket, so I'll let you have the same deal. And then they say something like, oh, and I want my 10% new customer discount as well. Then you start feeling a little bit, as a company, taken for granted. So there's some and some, isn't there? A lot depends on, like you said, the story that somebody tells you, but also the attitude of the customer. If they're demanding and expect it, then generally as human beings, we're a lot less keen to kind of give it to them. Whereas if they don't ask for it, but, they're very apologetic or they're very lovely about something, then you might give it to them and it feels nicer as a company there. It's a better experience than somebody who comes in a bit demanding. So I think as small businesses, it's much easier to give because you are essentially in charge of your own pricing. So if you want to make an adjustment to that, even on a one-person basis, you can. Whereas a big company like an insurance company, they probably have some ranges within which they've got a little bit of leeway, but they can't just go, oh, well, I'll give you 50% discount, because they're bound by what their bosses have said. This is what you do or don't do. So I think you've got a bit more flexibility as a small company.
Yeah, and it's a difficult, this subject of, is it actually about, because I'm listening to what you're saying, and as we've unfolded this and unpicked it, and I'm questioning, we headed this up about customer service, but is it about customer service? Is it about training? Is it about they're just fed up with customers' attitudes, constantly wanting discounts anyway, and therefore they're just like, well, we're just not going to budge. What's the point? Because we'll lose some and we'll keep some and we'll get some new ones in, and it's a numbers game and we don't really care because enough people need our service as opposed to want it. It's not a luxury buy. If you drive a car, you should have insurance. You've got a number of players that you can pick from. Most are as good as any other. The vast majority of people see it as a resentful purchase, so we'll go, I want the essentials covered and minimum cost. And they're probably aware of that, so the customer service element is there just to facilitate a conversation with you if it gets that far. But actually they'd much rather you speak to the portal. If you'd gone onto the portal the day before, you may well have got a price that was equitable and we wouldn't be having this discussion. You didn't. They probably just go, well, every time that happens, it breaks out 50-50 and we keep half and we lose half. We're all right with that.
But that's the point, though, isn't it? Because as a customer, I felt like their attitude was, oh, well, you don't matter to us. And I probably don't, because it probably is a numbers game for them. And that's the downside of dealing with large companies where you are just a number and not a person. But what they didn't do was they didn't say, where's your new quote from? How much is it? Is there anything we can do? They didn't, they just said, I just said, well, your quote for what I want is more than twice as expensive. That was the entire conversation. They didn't try at any point to say, okay, we can't reduce the price, but we could maybe give you a free courtesy car if you have an accident. Chances of me having an accident, relatively low. You can look at my my history. But that would have been a way for them to give something that would have felt more positive for me as a customer than just going, oh, well, bye. Because that's what it felt like. I don't matter. And the reality of it is that when I look at my insurance next year, I'll remember that and I'll probably go, they don't really care about customers.
How long have you been with them?
This is the first year that I've been with them. And I took my insurance out in December. And, you know, I mean, just, it doesn't matter. Like you say, it doesn't really matter because I haven't had an accident for a long time. And so chances of me ever needing to speak to them are pretty slim. It's just that I needed to make a small change. And I understand what you're saying about, well, insurance companies and, you know, it's a numbers game. But then I compare that to, I was with Shirley's Wheels for a long time. Partly because they consistently were not necessarily the cheapest but competitive, partly because I had a positive experience with them because, you know, they'd make it easy for me to renew. They would not only say this is what your insurance premium is, but they would do things like compare it and say, well, you know, we've had a look at the market. Here's what you might get from other suppliers, not necessarily naming other insurance companies, but, you know, this is what the average is. Yeah. And so is it that industry or is there still leeway for companies, even big companies, because Sheila's Wheel's a big company, you know, to actually still provide customer service which makes the customer feel important or feel valued or makes it easy for them? Because I'd argue that there's still space for that, no matter what size you are.
I think you're probably right, and it may be that it's not thought about, or it may be that it has been thought about, and they've done the numbers, and the cost of training. You know, the guy you spoke to be better across several thousand people. The opportunity cost there in the short term. Measured against the volatility of the pricing that actually they don't have any control over. I think that's the other thing to bear in mind, that he was expressing a situation that exists within the industry. The price is volatile day to day. From a customer service perspective, that could have been delivered in a better way.
Yes.
Completely.
And that's part of it, isn't it? Because you could argue he was trying to help me by making suggestions of how I could potentially find a different solution or a different price. It probably wasn't framed in the best way, and missed the point that as a customer, I just need to get this sorted so I can tick it off my list and move on. And they didn't resolve or notice that was the core issue. It wasn't necessarily about core pricing, because the company that I went for wasn't the cheapest quote that I had.
No.
But there were a number of factors, and it's too long to go into, but there were a number of factors why I went with that company, but it wasn't necessarily based on price. But the company that I was with missed that as part of my decision making. So yes, I agree, you know, they probably have done the cost benefit analysis and decided that actually they're just going to accept that there's an attrition rate and that's how it is. But I wonder whether there is actually room for a little bit of, you know, customer training, staff training that might just tweak that a tiny bit, just by the way that they speak to customers. I don't know.
Because it wouldn't have taken much, would it?
Well, I mean, they were considerably more expensive, so it probably would have taken some price movement to help me. But if let's say they'd met me in the middle, I might have just gone, okay, well, I'll stay. If I felt like they were helpful and that they were positive and they valued me as a customer, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting, and it made me start thinking, what can we do? Because we predominantly talk and deal with small companies, and we have a lot more control over pricing, but it isn't necessarily about pricing. So what can small companies do to retain customers, to make them feel important to them?
The list is endless, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, but it's an interesting question. It's maybe not one to necessarily us to answer now, because it does depend by company, but it's an interesting one for companies to ask themselves, is how can you retain customers?
I think you're right. And it's a good question that I'd love to hear answers about.
Definitely.
We're always interested in reading and seeing.
Yeah.
Occasionally listening to your comments and observations on what we talked about. So just to help people with that this week, do you want to just sum up what we've sort of covered in there? Because there's quite a lot in there actually, and there's some interesting points.
I think the main one for me is it's not necessarily about pricing in terms of customer retention and customer loyalty, and it does depend on what your business is, but I would urge people to maybe think creatively about what people really want from them as a company. There is some pricing in there, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a discount. It could be give a little of something else. It could be, that they want to feel heard and understood. It could be that you can add on something. There's even an opportunity to upsell people slightly. There's lots of different things. And I think you mentioned TV companies. And I think if you look at the likes of Sky and Netflix and stuff and see what they're doing and what you could pull from that and use in your own business, they've got teams of behavioural experts who look at how can we retain customers, how can we make it sticky and difficult for them to leave.
Yeah.
Not because it's hard for them to leave, it's quite easy to leave if you really want to, but what stops them from leaving? I think you can learn a lot from that type of company.
And I think actually that's far more about understanding the behaviours of customers to drive loyalty than customer service. Because I think if your business is set up to endanger loyalty and to get people feeling that they want to stay, that it's difficult to leave, you don't have to worry about customer service so much because you're not having to deal with as many people, and you've created an external facing culture, which is one that people want to be part of.
Yep.
And I think that's possibly the sort of holy grail for a lot of businesses.
How can you make your customers feel like they matter?
Yeah.
Because when you can hit that, pricing becomes somewhat irrelevant. Not completely irrelevant, but more irrelevant.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Brilliant.
Cool.
Good chat. Excellent.
Absolutely.
See you next week.
And you.